It was a crisp autumn morning in the small town of Riversdale, where life unfolded with predictable certainty. Shopkeepers opened their stores, children hurried to school, and the occasional car disturbed the peaceful quiet of tree-lined streets. Officer James Wilson and his canine partner, Shadow, had just started their morning patrol, their routine as familiar as the town itself. Shadow was no ordinary police dog, a magnificent German shepherd with intelligent amber eyes and a coat as dark as midnight. He had been with the Riversdale Police Department for 5 years. His reputation was legendary: 13 successful missing persons searches, 27 drug busts, and countless arrests. But beyond the statistics was something deeper, a bond between handler and dog that transcended ordinary partnership. "Ready for another day, buddy?" James asked, reaching down to scratch behind Shadow's ears. The dog responded with a low, contented rumble, pressing his head against his partner's palm. Their patrol car radio crackled to life. "All units be advised. We have a 1070 at Riverside Elementary School. Possible armed suspect. All available officers respond immediately." James felt his heart plummet as he reached for the radio. "Unit K9 responding." His voice was steady despite the fear coursing through him. Riverside Elementary was where his 8-year-old daughter Emma attended school. The tires screeched as James made a sharp turn, siren wailing into the morning air. Beside him, Shadow's demeanor transformed instantly. Gone was the relaxed companion. In his place sat a vigilant protector, muscles tense and ears erect, sensing the urgency of their mission. When they arrived at the school, chaos greeted them. Parents had begun gathering at the police barricade, their faces etched with terror. Officers were establishing a perimeter, and SWAT team members were strategizing near their vehicles. The school building loomed silent and ominous. Captain Reynolds approached as James and Shadow exited their vehicle. "Wilson, we've got a situation. Male suspect, armed, has barricaded himself in the East Wing, with approximately 20 students and 2 teachers. Negotiator is en route, but he's making erratic demands." James struggled to maintain his composure. "Emma's class is in the East Wing," Reynolds confirmed grimly. "I'm sorry, James." The world seemed to tilt beneath Officer Wilson's feet. Shadow pressed against his leg, a solid anchor in the storm of fear threatening to overwhelm him. Taking a deep breath, James knelt beside his partner. "We're going in there, Shadow. We're going to bring them home." His voice broke slightly on the last word, but Shadow's unwavering gaze steadied him. The tactical plan was quickly established. While negotiators maintained contact with the suspect, James and Shadow would access the school through a maintenance entrance, attempting to locate the hostages and assess the situation from within. SWAT would stand ready to intervene if necessary. As they prepared to enter, James attached Shadow's tactical vest and checked his equipment one last time. His hands trembled slightly as he fastened the bulletproof material around his partner's torso. "I need you more than ever today, boy," he whispered. Shadow's response was a soft whine and a nudge of his nose against James's cheek, a promise between warriors. The maintenance corridor was dark and narrow, their progress slow and deliberate. James relied on Shadow's heightened senses to navigate, watching for any signal from his partner that might indicate danger ahead. The dog moved with supernatural quiet, his paws barely making a sound on the linoleum floor. Through his earpiece, James could hear fragments of the negotiation. The suspect was becoming increasingly agitated, his demands more irrational. Time was running out. They reached the junction that would lead them to the East Wing classrooms. Shadow suddenly froze, his body rigid with alert attention. A low, almost imperceptible growl rumbled in his chest. Someone was coming. James and Shadow pressed themselves against the wall, disappearing into the shadows as a figure passed their position. A man, tall and thin, muttering to himself, a handgun clutched tightly in his trembling right hand. The suspect had momentarily left the hostages. This was their chance. With a silent hand signal, James commanded Shadow to follow. They tracked the man at a safe distance, watching as he entered what appeared to be the school's small library. Once the door closed behind him, James radioed in. "Suspect has separated from hostages. Currently in the library. Request immediate extraction team for the classrooms." "Copy that, Wilson." Extraction team moving in. What's your position? Shadow and I will maintain visual on the suspect. We'll prevent him from returning to the hostages. There was a moment of hesitation before the captain responded. Understood. Be careful. James knew he was deviating from protocol, but with Emma's life at stake, he couldn't leave anything to chance. He and Shadow positioned themselves in the corridor, a living barrier between the library and the classrooms where frightened children waited. Minutes passed like hours. Through his earpiece, James heard confirmation that SWAT had begun extracting the hostages. Relief flooded through him, but it was short-lived. The library door suddenly burst open, and the suspect emerged, his face contorted with rage as he realized his leverage was disappearing. "Police, drop your weapon," James commanded, his service pistol trained on the man. The suspect's eyes darted between James and Shadow, who stood poised for action, a low, threatening growl emanating from deep in his chest. For a moment, it seemed the man might comply. His hand wavered, the gun dipping slightly. Then chaos erupted. The man fired wildly down the corridor, forcing James to take cover. In that split second of distraction, the suspect turned and fled toward another part of the building. "Shadow, apprehend," James shouted, and the dog launched forward like a black missile, a blur of focused power and determination. The suspect turned a corner, Shadow in close pursuit. James followed, heart pounding, adrenaline surging through his veins. He heard a crash, then a scream, followed by 2 gunshots that echoed through the empty hallways. Shadow, the name tore from James's throat as he rounded the corner, weapon raised. The scene before him froze his blood. The suspect was on the ground. Shadow's powerful jaws locked around his arm. The gun kicked away across the floor. But even as the man was subdued, James saw the spreading crimson stain on Shadow's tactical vest. "Officer needs assistance. Canine officer down." James's voice cracked as he radioed for help, rushing to secure the suspect and reach his partner. Once the suspect was handcuffed, James turned his full attention to Shadow. The dog had released his hold, and now lay on his side, breathing heavily, eyes fixed on his handler with unwavering trust. "Stay with me, buddy. Stay with me." James pressed his hands against the wound, trying to stem the bleeding. Shadow whimpered softly, but made no attempt to move away from the pain. Instead, he tried to lift his head, still determined to serve, to protect. SWAT officers flooded the corridor, securing the suspect and clearing the way for medical assistance. James barely noticed them, his world narrowed to the loyal eyes gazing up at him. "I've got you," he whispered fiercely. "You did good, Shadow. So good." The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Shadow was rushed to the emergency veterinary hospital, the police escort clearing traffic for the desperate journey. James, his uniform stained with his partner's blood, refused to leave the dog's side, even as they wheeled him into surgery. In the sterile waiting room, time seemed to stop. James sat with his head in his hands, replaying the events over and over. A gentle touch on his shoulder startled him. Looking up, he found Emma standing there, her small face solemn but composed. "Is Shadow going to be okay, Daddy?" she asked quietly. James pulled his daughter into his arms, holding her tightly. "I don't know, sweetheart. The doctors are doing everything they can." Emma pulled back slightly, her expression serious. "He saved us, didn't he? My teacher said a police dog stopped the bad man." "Yes," James managed, his throat tight. "Shadow did that. He's a hero. Then he has to be okay," Emma stated with the simple certainty of childhood. Heroes always get better. Hours stretched into the night. Other officers came and went, offering support and updates. The suspect was in custody. No one else had been injured, and the town was calling Shadow a hero. None of it mattered to James until the veterinarian finally emerged from surgery, her expression cautiously optimistic. "He's lost a lot of blood, and the bullet narrowly missed his heart," she explained. "But he's strong, and he's fighting. The next 24 hours will be critical." "Can I see him?" James asked, his voice barely audible. The vet nodded. "He's been whimpering for you. I think he needs to know you're okay too." Shadow lay on a treatment table, connected to monitors and IV fluids, his powerful body now looking vulnerable under the harsh fluorescent lights. When James approached, the dog's tail thumped weakly against the metal surface. "Hey partner," James whispered, gently stroking Shadow's head. "You really scared me back there." Shadow's eyes, though clouded with pain and medication, focused on James with the same loyalty and devotion they'd always held. He made a valiant effort to lift his head. "No, no, stay still," James soothed. "You've done enough for today, rest now." As if understanding, Shadow exhaled deeply and allowed his head to settle back, but his eyes never left James's face. In that gaze was everything that had defined their partnership: trust, courage, and an unbreakable bond. The town of Riversdale rallied around their canine hero. Flowers and cards piled up outside the veterinary hospital. Children from Riverside Elementary made a massive get-well banner decorated with paw prints and childish drawings of a black dog wearing a cape. Local businesses donated to cover Shadow's medical expenses, though the department had already committed to handling them. For 3 days, Shadow fought. James rarely left his side, sleeping in an uncomfortable chair beside the treatment area, his hand always in contact with some part of his partner: an ear, a paw, the soft fur of his neck. They had been through so much together, from routine patrols to life-threatening situations, and James couldn't imagine continuing without the loyal presence by his side. On the 4th morning, James awoke to something wet against his hand. Opening his eyes, he found Shadow licking his fingers, those amber eyes clearer than they had been since the shooting. "Well, look who's feeling better," the veterinarian remarked as she entered, smiling at the tableau before her. "His vitals have stabilized, and he's responding exceptionally well to treatment." Canine officers are remarkable patients. They have a will to recover that's almost supernatural. "When can I take him home?" James asked, hope rising in his chest for the first time in days. "Another few days of observation, then he'll need several weeks of rest and rehabilitation. But I believe he'll make a full recovery, Officer Wilson." The news spread quickly through Riversdale. By afternoon, a small crowd had gathered outside the veterinary hospital, cheering when James briefly appeared at the window with Shadow carefully cradled in his arms, the dog's tail wagging weakly but determinedly at the sight of so many people. Recovery was not easy. There were setbacks and painful therapy sessions, nights when Shadow whimpered in his sleep, perhaps reliving the trauma. But through it all, the bond between dog and handler only strengthened. Where James had once been the protector and guide, their roles sometimes reversed during Shadow's rehabilitation. The dog seemed to sense when James was drowning in guilt or fear, pressing his warm body against his partner's leg, or resting his head on his lap until the darkness passed. 3 months after the school incident, Shadow was cleared to return to limited duty. Their first day back began with a special assembly at Riverside Elementary, where Shadow was presented with a custom-made badge of honor by Emma's class. The once fierce police dog sat patiently as small hands patted his head and children whispered, "Thank you," in his attentive ears. "How does he know to be so gentle with kids?" the school principal asked, watching in amazement as Shadow allowed a particularly enthusiastic first grader to hug him around the neck. James smiled, watching his partner bask in the attention. He knows who needs protection and who needs comfort. That's what makes him special. As they left the school that day, Shadow walked with his characteristic alertness, but there was something new in his bearing, a deeper sense of purpose, as if his brush with mortality had only reinforced his commitment to service. James felt it too, this renewed appreciation for their work, and for each breath they took together. In the car, before starting the engine, James took a moment to scratch behind Shadow's ears, finding the spot that always made the dog's eyes close in contentment. "Ready for another day, buddy?" he asked, echoing the question from that fateful morning months ago. Shadow's response was to place one paw firmly on James's arm, his gaze steady and clear. In those amber depths, James saw everything that needed saying, that they were partners in the truest sense, bound by experiences no words could capture, that whatever came next, they would face it together. "Yeah," James said softly, starting the engine. "Me too." Life in Riversdale continued its rhythm. Shopkeepers opened their stores, children hurried to school, and occasional troubles disturbed the peace. But something had fundamentally changed. In this small town, people now understood the extraordinary courage that could exist in the heart of a dog, and the profound bond that could form between two beings committed to protecting others at any cost. And every day, a black German shepherd, with intelligent amber eyes, and a small scar beneath his tactical vest, patrolled the streets alongside his human partner, ready to serve, ready to protect, embodying the silent, steadfast heroism that asks for nothing in return. For Shadow, it was simply what he was born to do. For the town of Riversdale, it was a daily reminder that heroes come in many forms, and sometimes, the most extraordinary among them walk on 4 legs instead of 2.